Hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving. Still recovering, I'm sure. Because if you're anything like us, we had Thanksgiving the past 3 days, all the leftovers and such. But Thanksgiving is now done and over with. We gave thanks. Merry Christmas. That's what I gotta say. Yes, it is now officially in my house the Christmas season. I know some of you sinners celebrate Christmas as of November 1st. Take that up with God. Anyways, but it's officially the Christmas season. We're excited. I'm excited about it. We have some fun things planned for, Ohana. We get to be in the Christmas parade this year, which is next week, which is crazy. But we're excited about that. And just so you know, we're doing that because we just figured it's time to just let the whole town know Ohana is here. So people will know that we're actually here. So we have some fun things for that. And, just other great things that we have planned. We're excited about the things that we're going to be doing. And I know for most of us, this is our favorite time of year, for exception of a couple Grinches out there. But there's the good news. All right? If you're one of those people that your family's like, you're the Grinch, you're the Grinch. The good news is on Christmas Day, your heart will grow 4 sizes bigger. And you will no longer be a Grinch. So everybody will love you on Christmas Day. They just have to put up with you until then. But either way, we're just excited about this time. And so when we're thinking about going into this Christmas season, we're like, hey, what are the things that we kind of want to do? And so we've came up with just doing for a Christmas series called Christmas Chronicles. And the reason why we want to do that is because, there's a lot of things that lead up to the event of the birth of Jesus. Yes, this is what we celebrate. This is what we look forward to. There's a lot of things that are happening in the scriptures and the story of Jesus before he arrives. So we want to look at different people's, chronicles that led up to this moment. And that's what we want to look into during this time and during this series with us. Because the thing is, this Christmas time, this season is a time of anticipation and a time of expectation where we're waiting for Christmas Day. We're excited about it. Kids are excited about it because they have their long list that they have given all of you, and they expect you to meet their demands. If not, I don't know what they will do. Kids are crazy. There's no telling what kids will do. But this is what they're expecting. But even for us, it's that time of expectation and waiting, and we're just waiting for the birth of the Savior. This is what we celebrate every single year. And this is something that actually, as we do this, if you think about it, we actually mimic a little bit and we symbolize what Israel had to do in waiting for the Messiah. They had this expectation, this anticipation that the Messiah would come. They were waiting for him to come. So every year during this Christmas season, we get to do the same thing. We have this time of anticipation. So before we continue, I'm going to pray, and then we'll continue on in the word. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for today and the time to be in your house, and just thank you for this time that we get to celebrate the birth of your Son, which just marks the beginning of so much more, and the beginning of him giving his life for us and us being able, to be here, and what led to us being here even to this day. And we just thank you so much for that. And I just pray that you be with all of us during this time, as it can be fun, but it can also be hectic, or it can be stressful or sad. Who knows? There's so many emotions that come with this season. I just pray, please be with all of us here as we go through this time. And even though it can come with different emotions or excitements or stresses, that we will keep our focus on the main thing that matters during this time, which is celebrating your birth and the fact that you sent your Son for us so we can be with you for all eternity. Thank you so much for that gift. In his name I pray. Amen. So, the first thing as we get into this, I know we talked about, this Christmas season, the things that are happening and this anticipation, but what I want us to do is to kind of think like, let's go back a little bit. Because before we get into the different stories that we have in this series, or even the story today, one thing that we need to realize as we've talked about waiting and expectation is before the events that we're about to cover today, there have been what is called the 400 years of silence. All right, so the 400 years of silence means that for 400 years, the nation of Israel had not heard a new revelation from God since the prophet Malachi. Malachi was the last prophet that actually spoke on God's behalf and would speak to the nation of Israel. Since he passed, and that was it, there's 400 years where God did not speak to his people through a prophet. This is why this is known the 400 years of silence. So between Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, and the book of Matthew or Luke, because they synoptic gospels, they all pick up the story right before Jesus arrives. So between the New and Old Testament, 400 years where nothing happened as far as revelation. And so the nation of Israel, they're just waiting. They know the Messiah is supposed to come. They're expecting him to come. They're just waiting. They're waiting around. When is he going to come? We want him to be here now. Now, during this time of silence, have you ever heard of the Apocrypha? That is a set of historical things that happened within the nation of Israel that if you ever want to read it, it's very interesting reading. It's very good history to just kind of know. It's very interesting. If you want to read it, that's up to you. But pretty much as far as like revelation, there's nothing else that happens. And so what we have is you have this nation that if you start even with Genesis, right? God's creating Adam, speaking to Adam, and then going all through Malachi, you had these different judges, the patriarchs, you had prophets, you had even some kings that would talk to God. So the nation of Israel did have this like normalcy of we would hear from God. We would hear God speak to us. There were things that we were told. They were kind of used to this, and then nothing happens. However, even though they didn't have that revelation, they still had the Old Testament law. And so Judaism just continued. They continued in their rituals. They continued, in their temple service and their sacrifices, everything. They just continued waiting for the Messiah to come. And this is where we're actually going to pick up today. We're going to be in Luke chapter 1. This is where we're going to start picking up in the story. This is where everything has happened. This is where Israel's been. And then now we have God stepping back in. Chapter 1, starting in verse 5. In the days of Herod, king of Judea, there was a priest named Zacharias of the division of Abijah, and he had a wife from the daughters of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. They were both righteous in the sight of God, walking blamelessly in all the commandments and requirements of the Lord. But they had no child, because Elizabeth was barren, and they were both advanced in years. So here's where we're picking up. In this story, we have the priest named Zacharias. He had his wife Elizabeth. They're both, they're priests. They had priestly descent. She was from the daughters of Aaron, so priestly descent there. So they're both there. They would have this. Both of them actually would have a good amount of knowledge of the scriptures and the promises of the Messiah and all those kinds of things. And so they would have that. And we even see how they're described. They're both righteous before God, blameless in all the commandments and the statutes of the Lord. This is how both of them are being described. And can you even imagine being described like that? Like if someone described us that way? Righteous, blameless in all the commandments and the statutes of the Lord. But I would love to be described that way, but I've done too many stupid things. But like this is how they're being described. Now, understand, this doesn't mean that they are perfect. This doesn't mean that they're just, these perfect examples of humanity. No one was perfect except for Jesus. However, this is how they're described because they followed, Jewish laws. They prayed, they worshiped, they gave their offerings, they gave to the poor. They did all the things they're supposed to do. And they followed them faithfully. So essentially, these are awesome people. But notice what Luke says after this. But they had no child because she was barren, and they were both advanced in years. Now, this is devastating. Here are two people, like we talk about, are blameless. They did everything right. They're doing everything they're supposed to do. They're being praised for their commitment to God. And even though they're completely committed, they still had no child. Now, this is a big deal because at this time, having children was everything. Especially having sons was really everything. See, because having boys at this time was a sign of blessing, and it meant that their family line was going to continue. Their family line would continue to strengthen as long as they had sons. And so this is their mindset at the time. So according to Jewish laws, like I am not blessed at all because I can apparently only make girls. And so I am not blessed. And according to their standards, I, of course, would strongly disagree that I believe I am very blessed. Just not between the hours of 6 and 8 a.m. That's when I do not feel any blessing from these children. But besides that, amazing. I love being the father of girls. And, when Katie, I think I might have told her, but when Katie was pregnant with Jade, she's like, maybe it's a boy. I'm like, do not say that. No. We got a system. We got 2 girls. Just another girl. Just keep the girls coming. We're good. The Jews will disagree. Because for them, like I said, it's all about the continuing that family line and having the family strengthened. And it's that sign of blessing. So for them, not having children at all, honestly, would have been a sign of shame. Because for them, they believed if a woman was barren, it was because of some sin that she had committed, or maybe a sin that her parents or his parents had committed, or maybe even grandparents had committed. They would go back and say, like, yeah, you can't have children because of some sin in your life or in your family's life. And so this is why it brought a lot of shame. Now, of course, this wasn't a good look for a priest and his wife, because it's like, some things aren't adding up. But of course, this doesn't really make sense for this to be the case because of how Luke just described them. Blameless and committed, righteous. So obviously that is not the case. And this is where I think maybe most of us, if not all of us, can truly, start to relate to Zacharias and Elizabeth here. Because maybe there's times where we look at our lives and we think, man, my prayer life has been awesome, and I'm serving in the church, I'm loving my neighbors, I read my Bible consistently, I'm in group, I give my offerings, I do all these things. All I ever truly ask for really is needs. But man, there's just this one thing, God, maybe it's a want, maybe it's a need, I don't know, but there's the one thing, God, I just really need or want or desire, however it wants to be worded. And we feel like we have done everything, we've done all the right things, and we're thinking, God, this is, what else do you want from me? Why can't you just give me this one thing? Because I've sacrificed so much. And this one thing I feel will truly give me the strength to keep going. Now, this is kind of the things that goes through our mind that I believe were gone through Zacharias and Elizabeth's mind as well. Like, come on, God, look at everything I've devoted to you. And I'm continuing to be devoted. It's just, man, this would really, really be helpful. God, I really need you in this. But what I do hope that we can at least learn from Zacharias and Elizabeth, even at this point, is even though that was their reality, and that was what their struggles were, that's what was going through their minds, they still stayed committed for a lifetime. They still stayed committed to the Lord. Because remember, it says they were advanced in years. They were already older, past the time of childbirth, really. But they still remained committed. Even though they never received what they were asking for, they remained faithful. Because we know that because of how they've already been described. And this is the perfect example of what it looks like to not get the answer we want from God and still trust in his sovereignty and his plan. So let us continue in the story and see what continues to unravel. Verse 8. Now it happened that while he was performing his priestly service before God in the appointed order of his division, according to the custom of the priestly office, he was chosen by lot to enter the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And the whole multitude of people were in prayer outside at the hour of the incense offering. All right, so real quick, just to get in the mindset of what's happening here, is we have these, it says he's of his division, right? So there's 4 divisions of priests. These different divisions, they make sure everything is up and running properly in the temple, whether it's keeping things clean, making sure sacrifices are made, making sure prayers are made, literally polishing gold, making sure the gold is nice and shiny. Like there's all these things that they have going on, and the different divisions take care of those things, and they rotate, and they take care of everything. So the temple is always in pristine condition, because they're like, hey, this is where God resides. We got to make sure everything is perfect. So that's what they did. And then so this incense offering is going into the temple of the Lord. They're making sure, part of this is, part of the custom of, they're offering their incense, and it's like a pleasing aroma to God. I'm trying to give you the short version. But essentially, like they have to go in and make sure the incense is burning. It's burning right. Things smell right. And the thing is that happening here is where it says in the temple of the Lord. Now, this phrasing here, temple of the Lord, what it means is essentially is in the presence of God. Now, this is where priests would go, and they were considered to be right there in the throne room of God. So this is why they cast lots. They cast lots, like if you want to say like drawing straws, all right, same kind of thing, to see, from your division, who was actually going to go in there and do this incense offering. The reason why is because it was very scary to do this. Because if you went in there and did something wrong in the presence of the Lord, or if you did something just inappropriate, or you could have even made a mistake, the threat of death would happen. You could die. And there were times that priests would die. So they would cast lots. Okay, it's your turn, buddy. Good luck. And that's why it says everybody else, the multitude, as in all the divisions, would be out there praying over the man who's going in there to make sure everything goes well so he doesn't die. This is how intense it was. And so they're like, okay, this is what's happening. So it's Zacharias' turn. He's in there by himself doing his priestly duties, making sure the incense and everything is right. And this is what we're setting up. So he's being covered in prayer by all the other priests. And then something happens. Verse 11. And an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing to the right of the altar of incense. Zacharias was troubled when he saw the angel, and fear gripped him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zacharias, for your petition has been heard, and your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will give him the name John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord, and he will drink no wine or liquor, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit while yet in his mother's womb. And he will turn many of the sons of Israel back to the Lord their God. It is he who will go as a forerunner before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers back to the children, and the disobedient to the attitude of the righteous, so as to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." So the angel appears to him, and the first thing Zechariah does is freak out. Rightfully so, after what we just talked about what's going on, like what him having to do this. Of course, he sees this angel, I'm dead. That's probably his first thought. Oh my goodness, I'm dead. What did I do? It's almost kind of like, what? Why? But then Gabriel comes in and he's just like, hey, do not be afraid. And he is here to give him amazing news. God has heard your petition. God has heard your prayers. And you will have a son. The thing that they have been praying about for years. Even though they're advanced in years, they're still praying. Like, again, this word petition means continuous prayer, coming to God over and over and over. God, please, give us a child. Give us a son. God, please. This is the thing that we want. And he says, God has heard your prayer, finally. And it's going to be answered in a way that he had been hoping for, in the sense that not just having a child, but having a son. Oh, what amazing news. And one thing that I just think about is, like, even at this point, it's like this should show us that we must remain faithful in our waiting, because God is always working. We may think when we petition God, come to him consistently, we may think he might just be ignoring me, or maybe it was just no, or maybe, God just doesn't want this for me. I don't know. Or maybe just, is there something wrong with me that God just maybe can't hear me? Maybe I've sinned too much and made a barrier. Like what? Like we start having these questions, but man, just because we're waiting on an answer doesn't mean that God isn't continuing to work. He has his plan. Things are happening. I mean, just because even if we don't get the answer in the time frame we want, doesn't mean he doesn't hear us. Because honestly, sometimes the answer is just, wait a second. Just wait. Which, let's just be honest, wait is better than no. I mean, like if we're asking for something, we'll just wait. Okay, well, that's not a no. That's like my kids. Maybe. Well, that doesn't mean no. That's so much better. If it's wait, we need to be okay with that. I mean, just look, Israel waited 400 years to hear something else from God. And they waited thousands of years for this Messiah to come. And even Zacharias waited a lifetime to hear from God. And listen, God always answers our prayers, always. Sometimes it's yes, sometimes it's no, sometimes it's wait. And if it's wait, just continue to wait with all the faith and trust in God's plans and in his ways and in his timing. Like I already talked about earlier, during this Christmas season, we're excited and we wait expectantly for the arrival of December 25th, Christmas Day, where we're excited for those things. We throw parties so we can celebrate, maybe with coworkers or friends or family. And, we do all these things to get ready. But as Christians, we do this because, we want to receive the ultimate gift, the gift of salvation. This is what we are excited about. This is what makes Jesus' birth so exciting, because it started with his humble birth. So this time of year, honestly, should be good practice for us. And this practice of waiting and being patient as God continues to work out his plans in our lives. And we should have this kind of mindset that, listen, everything that happened throughout history in the nation of Israel, this 400 years of silence, God still was working. Things were still moving forward according to his plan. And this time, every year, should be also that reminder of God continues to work even in our waiting. Now, what's funny as we continue here is what happens though when we get the answer from God? Maybe even the answer we want. Like how do we react? Well, look at Zacharias, verse 18. Zacharias said to the angel, "How will I know this for certain? For I am an old man and my wife is advanced in years." This is where I'm like, Zacharias, dude, seriously? You are in the temple. You just went from, I'm about to die, to hearing great news that you're going to have a son, that your prayers have been heard by God Almighty. You hear everything he has to say. And not only does he say, like the angels say, you're going to have a son, but your son is also going to be the forerunner to the Messiah. Like he's going to lay the groundwork and get everything ready for the Messiah to come. And your son is going to be the one to usher in him. So you hear all this, and your first reaction is, are you sure? Are you sure, Mr. Angel? Like really, human angel? Trust the angel, man. But the problem for him, and the reason why he's having this struggle, is because maybe the constant years of prayers, over and over, hearing nothing, he's just kind of beaten down. He knows he's advanced in years, and he's just like, man, but we haven't really heard anything from God personally. The nation hasn't heard anything. Nothing amazing has truly happened. And now you're telling me this fantastical story? Is this true? I mean, look at my current condition. Maybe this is where we can start to relate with him again, because it's like, if we hear this prayer, maybe we've decided, maybe I just need to stop praying for that. Because look at my current condition. My time has passed. Maybe I just never should have had that. I think this is where we can understand where Zacharias is coming from, because it just seems like it's too little too late, God, at this point. Or maybe, we just think, maybe it's just too good to be true. Is this really what's happening? Because maybe for us, yes, we may remain faithful. We may continue to pray day after day. But because it's been so long and the things we've went through, and maybe we've gone through the motions a little bit, maybe we just truly believe it can no longer be done. And so maybe we think we've missed that opportunity, or we no longer have the strength for whatever it was we were praying for. And we start to think these things because even though we want to remain faithful, we feel we have nothing left to give. We just kind of feel like it's just, God, God, I'm going to remain faithful. Like, I'm not saying I'm walking away, but it's just like, I'm tired. I'm just tired, and all this waiting and everything else, it just seems like so much. And this is why we have his response. How can I be sure? Because I'm old. My wife is old. Really? Now's the time? Are you sure you have the right guy? I don't know if there's much left in me. But then look at Gabriel's response, or the angel's response. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel, who stands in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and bring you this good news. I'm the one who has been sent to you. I am Gabriel. I've been in the presence of God. I was selected to bring you, yes, good news. This news should not bring you sadness. This news should not make you question God at this point. Like, I'm bringing you some amazing news. He's trying to encourage Zacharias at this point with the fact that of who he is, where he came from, and his purpose. Again, this is Gabriel. And this one, like when it says, like, I've been in the presence of God. This is communicating. Zacharias would have understood this, that this phrasing of him saying, I'm coming from the presence of God, means that he is the angel with great faithfulness and holiness and also great responsibility, because he is the one who is in charge of giving the good news to the people. He is the one that is being sent by God. So if he's the one, he's God's messenger. He's the one coming down like, listen, God told me to tell you, this is how you can be sure. And you can trust me because I'm in the presence of God at all times. To be in the presence of God at all times, there has to be complete holiness. There has to be, complete faithfulness and trusting in everything that God is doing. So you can trust the words of this angel Gabriel. And what's funny is this angel actually had similar qualities to Zacharias. I mean, a man, we just heard that they're righteous before God. We've heard how Zacharias was just described. We just talked about Gabriel. And Zacharias is faithful. He's striving to be holy, and he also had big responsibilities in the presence of God, in the temple. Like, Zacharias should hear this and be like, oh, this makes sense. Like, we're kind of similar. Not the same. You're up there with God, but I get it. This makes a lot more sense. And this alone should have been evidence for Zacharias to celebrate and be glad. Even though he was still afraid of this news, and he believed it might have been too good to be true. But even from Gabriel's encouragement to try to get Zacharias to understand what is happening, he wants him to understand, and maybe good for us to understand too, that good news from God is always true. It's never too good to be true. If you hear it from God, it's always true. Just be excited. Yeah, it may not happen in our timing. It may have been years and years of petition, but it finally happened. Thank God. I'm so excited. God, okay, well, what's next? It's probably what should be our words. What next, God? So we continue on and seeing what's happening. Verse 20, and behold, you shall be silent and unable to speak until the day when these things take place, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in the proper time. The people were waiting for Zacharias and were wondering at his delay in the temple. They were hoping he wasn't dead. But when he came out, he was unable to speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the temple, and he kept making signs to them and remained mute. And when the days of his priestly service were ended, he went back home. See, Zacharias had a lifetime of faithfulness and dedication. And even though, in this moment, he had a little bit lack of faith and he questioned God. Yes, it came with some consequences, but even though that was the case, it didn't stop God's plan. So I think we can even be encouraged that even in our weak moments, God's plan will continue. Even if we feel like, I tried for so long, and I doubted God. I'm ashamed that I doubted God, but at least we can be encouraged that it just continues. God's plan will continue. Just because he became mute at this time and had to start making signs and pictures and all this thing to communicate with people, it didn't stop the birth of John. It didn't stop what God was doing. It was just, hey, for a little time, because you decided to open your big mouth and question God, now you're not going to be able to open that mouth at all until John is born. But it didn't stop it. It continued. And honestly, I kind of wonder if him coming out and being mute was even a bigger sign that God had been there, that he had seen this vision. We may even think what happens to us in that situation, like we may think like, man, that is a horrible thing to happen, but maybe God just still used that. God just still used that anyways. To be able to show everyone in the temple, yeah, God is here. God has spoken. 400 years of silence is done. Even in his lack of faith, God's plan continues. And this is why we will continue to wait as we pray. And even though it feels like God is inactive, or we feel we have these moments of weakness, it doesn't mean that God will stop working. It doesn't mean his plan has to change because of anything we've done or didn't do. God continues to be God, and we continue to be servants used by him for his kingdom and his glory. Because that's how God works. He just continued. See, because even though Zacharias failed in this moment, like we said, it didn't change the fact that his prayer was still going to be answered. He was still going to have a son because God has willed it. And this should be encouragement to all of us. And this morning, let's see how this portion of the story ends. In verse 24, it says, after these days, Elizabeth, his wife, became pregnant. And she kept herself in seclusion for 5 months, saying, this is the way the Lord has dealt with me in the days when he looked with favor upon me to take away my disgrace among men. This is her response. Now, maybe she just learned from the mistakes of her husband and this was her response. We don't know. But either way, this was her response. She said, this is how God has dealt with me, and my disgrace is now being taken away. And she spends time in seclusion, worshiping, thanking God for what is about to happen. Her prayer has finally been answered. And her response is, I'm going to step away from everything and just take some time to just thank God every single day for answering this prayer. Talk about an encouragement in a way just to kind of see things. It's like, because she was able to see what God was doing and what he has done, and just being able to say, I'm going to thank God. And I do wonder how many of us have done, taking that example of Elizabeth, where we spent years praying for something and then spending maybe just as much time thanking God for when he answers that prayer. Because I know for me, I'll be honest, I know for me, I can spend time praying for something that if my prayer gets answered, I'm excited, I thank God, I tell 5 people, they thank God, and we move on. But it's just like, man, even seeing this, we really should spend just as much time as we spend asking God for something. We should spend just as much time, if not more, thanking God for answering that prayer. Because for Elizabeth, look what this did for her. She had been barren. She had shame on her family, and she felt disgrace. But God stepped in and took it all away. This was part of the good news for them. This is part of what they get to see, not just the birth of a new baby, but because of what this baby will mean, this disgrace will be gone, the shame will be gone. And this is why she's so excited, because, not only does she have that, but then now she also knows that the Messiah is coming, because that's what's been told. And that her son gets to be the one to usher him in. What an honor. So not only is my personal disgrace and shame gone, but now my son's going to usher in the one who's going to take away shame and disgrace from everyone. This is exciting news. And this is what Israel had been waiting for. This is what Zacharias and Elizabeth had been waiting for. This is what everyone has been waiting for. And this is what we, during this Christmas season, we get to symbolically wait for as well. We get to practice that same kind of waiting of, man, this is what we've been waiting for, the arrival of our Savior, of our Messiah. And this is what we get to celebrate. So, Ohana, this morning, as we go to God with our prayers and we wait on his answer and in his timing, let's let this Christmas season be a reminder that in our waiting, God is always working.